Welcome everyone to a SeaEDH tournament video. This video is about the SeaEDH Finals, which is an event that happened yesterday, and it's how to win a foil Gaea's Cradle with Tymna Kraum. So to kick us off, the event details, this was the 9th edition of the SeaEDH Tournament Series. I will be talking about the SeaEDH Tournament Series over the video here. This was, of course, yesterday, November 23rd in Issaquah, Washington, which is about 20 minutes east of Seattle. I do want to give a huge a huge shout out to Marcus Mercado and Laughing Dragon. Of course, Laughing Dragon was the venue hosting. They have a store in Issaquah. And Marcus for putting on the whole SeaEDH tournament series. I remember sitting down with him, I think it would have been January of 2023 before he sort of kicked off this whole series and talking about some tournament organizing things, and we've come full circle over the past couple of years, and they've built out some awesome tournament series that I try to attend whenever I can. And of course, this one being the finals was the biggest prize pool and the biggest attendance and all that good stuff. So it was a pretty standard event. All the SeaEDH events, I believe, are 5 rounds of Swiss with a cut to top 16 with 80-minute rounds. So pretty standard tournaments for SeaEDH. First place was a Judge Foil Gaea's Cradle, and then 2nd through 4th were just regular old Gaea's Cradles. If you won a previous SeaEDH event, you got free entry into the finals event. So it was a pretty cool, awesome event, and I had a lot of fun. I do want to sort of give a brief outline of the SeaEDH sort of metagame. I went through and pulled the deck lists, the top 4 from the past SeaEDH events, so I'm going to briefly recap them. All the way back in May of 2023, we had Lauren, Adam, Atlas, and Kyle, 3 Kenrith decks and a Najeela deck. I want you to pay attention to this name, Atlas. We're going to be seeing it a lot as we go through the SeaEDH. So this was a cap for them, 48 players at the initial inauguratorial event, but it has gone up since then as they've just added more tables to the space, basically. Number 2 in July, again 48 players, which was capacity. Joshua, Atlas, Lauren, and Luke. Another couple Kenrith decks. I played against Luke and his Rogtavesh deck, I believe, in SeaEDH 9, so he's clearly been around for a while. I also played against Joshua, but he was playing Yisan in SeaEDH 9. Number 3 in October, again 48 players. Atlas here winning his first of the SeaEDH events. So he lost the previous 2 finals, but made his first appearance as a victor in October of 2023. Jake, Justin, and Parker playing Yeva, Rocco, and Sisse. SeaEDH 4 in February. This was the first SeaEDH tournament I was able to attend. I really started getting into playing SeaEDH tournaments in late 2023. And so in February of 2024, I brought a Kenrith deck that I dubbed High Power Casual, featuring cards like Nezahal and Atraxa. It was a goofy deck, but I was able to make the finals of the event with it, but did lose to Atlas. My slides frozen? There we go. SeaEDH 5 was the next event that I played in March of 2024. I brought Tymna Kraum anti-Atlas to this event, Atlas having won the previous 2 events. Why is my slides, there's like 3, whatever. There's a bunch of the slides right here are broken. Atlas having won the previous 2 events, I was like, well, I gotta take this guy down, so I built a deck specifically to beat him, which we will cover in a little bit more detail later. And again, you're going to see more Kenrith, of course, from Atlas, another Sisse deck, and another Tymna Kraum deck. Maybe I played Parker at SeaEDH 9, but he's been around for a while and does well, of course, with Sisse. SeaEDH 6, I won this one as well. I brought Nadu. You'll notice this is the first event that Atlas did not make the top 4 in. He lost to Luke playing Nadu. This was an event that I did a full recap of, specifically with a focus on Nadu on my channel. So there's another video. That was by far my most popular video before this one. So hopefully we'll see if SeaEDH continues to deliver the viewership that Canlander does not. SeaEDH 7, I was out of town, was unable to make this one in September of this year. Zolodok, the colorless 8-drop commander, 7-drop commander. Connor won. I played against Connor in SeaEDH 9. Atlas, of course, still making the finals here. I don't know if they split this or not. It was either this one or SeaEDH 8 where they split the finals, but Atlas was crowned the winner for SeaEDH 8 as well, beating out Ryan, Justin, and Ben. Ryan won the King of the North tournament on Rog Silas just a week before SeaEDH 9, and I'll briefly cover the deck list that I played in the finals pod at that event as well. But I lost to Ryan in the finals there, and I played against Ryan again in SeaEDH 9, and he made the finals in SeaEDH 9. So SeaEDH 9, 68 players, so new record for the SeaEDH tournament series. I played Tymna Kraum. I was crowned the winner, but we split. So we agreed at the start of the game because it was 12:30 at night, and multiple of us, Ryan's from Vancouver, British Columbia, so he had a 3-hour drive home. I was in a car with Jonas and Kilgore, who's mentioned later on in this video. So the three of us were all driving back to Portland, and that was a 3-hour drive, and 12:30 at night we were like, we don't want to play any more Magic. So we split the pod, and I said, can I have the win for the clout and for the elo over beating Atlas? So I was given the honorary victory here, but I did nothing to earn it outside of suggest the draw and ask for the clout. The Washington/Seattle metagame, and of course by extension the players from Portland, Vancouver, and Coeur d'Alene that come in from Oregon, British Columbia, and Idaho, is ridiculously grindy. As we sort of just reviewed, there's a lot of Kenrith and a lot of Sisay. These are the local meta decks that you will expect to see when you come to the Washington meta event. And so, of course, I tuned my deck with these two decks especially in mind. Previous SeaEDH events have tons of draws. I don't know whether it's because players like Atlas and myself lean towards intentional draws as easy ways to address potential kingmaking or particularly complex board states. But because the meta tends to be very grindy, you end up in a lot of games where players just either naturally draw or they just ID in rounds 3s, 4, 5. It's kind of crazy actually how many draws there are in these events. I think our number 16 player had 7 points, so they didn't even have 2 wins to make the top 16 at SeaEDH 9 because there are just so many draws in these events, which is, I think, unusual. I'm not certain. I haven't particularly dug into what other metagames look like, but draws are crazy common. So keeping that in mind, you don't need to win as many. Mostly you're playing for seat after your first couple wins. Of course, post-banning, I was expecting to see a lot of Thrasios and Kinnan. These are decks that weren't particularly impacted by the recent bannings of, Crypt, Dockside, Jeweled Lotus, and then, of course, Nadu. Nadu being, of course, a force to be reckoned with at SeaEDH 7, there was a Nadu, and then, of course, me on 2 Nadus in SeaEDH 6. None, of course, in SeaEDH 8 or 9 since they were post-ban. Of course, when I prep my metagame or prep my deck, I always want to be prepared for Rog Silas and other Tymna decks. These are just decks that will win games if you are not ready for them. So I wanted to make sure to have those as well. And of course, you have to be ready to beat Atlas. If you noticed, Atlas made the finals out of 8 of the 9 SeaEDH tournaments. He is a force to be reckoned with, easily the best player in the region by the numbers. And this is the deck list that he plays. It's, of course, changed over time. There used to be a Dockside loops in here. It is a relatively unorthodox Kenrith control list that relies on doing Cloud Shift, apparently. He talks about this card being essential to his deck, and I don't know if I agree with that, but he swears by it, and his results speak for themselves. So this deck is something to be ready. I'm not going to do a full deck tech on it, of course, but you have to be ready to beat Atlas if you come to a SeaEDH tournament, and so recognizing the Kenrith and the activated abilities of Kenrith and the graveyard interactions for Kenrith is sort of a fundamental game plan of one of the best players in the region. You have to be ready to beat it. Oh, the next slide is just a bunch of deck lists. So let's talk about the different deck lists. I played Tymna Kraum, of course, at SeaEDH 5. I played Tymna Kraum at Command Fest Vancouver. I played it just a week ago at King of the North, and then again, of course, yesterday at SeaEDH 9. So I've got 4 Tymna Kraum deck lists that I want to talk about and sort of explore what I was doing behind those lists and why I chose to play the cards I chose to play. I won SeaEDH 5. I won the Command Fest Vancouver. I top 4'd King of the North, and then we split the top 4 for SeaEDH 9. So decent results with the 4 decks, or the 4 tournaments that I've brought Tymna Kraum to. I guess there's a 5th tournament that I brought it to. There was a Guardian Games tournament, but that was a deck that I played. It was my friend's deck that I played for him on his behalf to get some reps on it. So I didn't spend any time brewing it, which is why I'm not covering it here. So SeaEDH 5, the anti-Atlas tech. 8 months ago, I was like, I have to beat this guy that plays Kenrith. So how do I do that? Well, I put Containment Priest, I put Dothi Voidwalker, I put Drana and Linvala, I put Cursed Totem in my deck. For the most part, this is a relatively standard 4-color pile mid-range deck. You've got all of your usual suspects. There are cards in here that are a little bit stronger into heavy creature grindy metas, cards like Gilded Drake. I was testing out Trouble in pairs, but otherwise you're going to look and see a pretty standard, pretty normal 4-color pile. When I was going to Command Fest, I did not need all of that tech. I didn't have to play against Atlas, but I did feel like I was going to have to play against decks that wanted to activate their abilities. So you'll notice I did keep the Drana and Linvala. There is no Cursed Totem here, no Containment Priest, no Dothi Voidwalker. And in fact, if we do a little compare, talk about some of these specific cards. There's only really four slot swaps, and of course losing those 3 tech pieces and a Deluge. I am back on Deluge. I think playing a board wipe is worth doing, but these are, I guess I was hoping to play Dress Down over Deluge. I think Deluge is better at this stage, but relatively similar deck lists, just cutting some of that specific tech in my anti-Atlas version to go to the Command Fest, and I did win this event. So it pretty standard 94 card similarity in Tymna Kraum. Jumping forward to the deck list that I played yesterday, of course this is the first of my deck lists post-ban. This one has a bit more swaps. Of course you're going to see no Dockside, Mana Crypt, or Jewel Lotus, but I started dropping clones. So Flesh Duplicate and Phantasmal Imager gone. The Mana Drain that I was playing left the list as well. I don't think that you need as many hard counters as I don't think you need the hard counter of Mana Drain. It's just not good enough. Soul Partition, of course, a removal spell that works well with Dockside, made it into became it into the Flood Maw. I'm less and less concerned about Grand Abolishers as I used to be. Not because they're less good, just because I'm not seeing as many of them, and so I ended up cutting touch of the Spirit Realm in favor of cards like Path to Exile, and then of course the Flood Maw. There's a couple cards here that I dropped off. Mnemonic Betrayal, which did not make it into the King of the North list. It did make it to the SeaEDH 9 list, which we'll see in a moment. Offer, I have been convinced, is just not good enough. While I did drop the Flesh Duplicate Phantasmal Image clones, we added in Mockingbird. Mockingbird, of course, being foundable off Ranger Captain, really is the selling point of this card, and the additional, potentially costing 3 or 4 mana if you're copying something a little bit bigger, almost never comes up. The biggest upside here is, of course, that it gives it flying, which makes it a great Tymna attacker. I've had a lot of great results with Mockingbird. I don't know why I wasn't playing Morphic Pool in the Tymna Kraum Command Fest list. That's wrong. I was playing Steam Vents. That's wrong. Just play Morphic Pool. One sort of set of cards that I became a lot more interested in after the Dockside were Mox Opal, Mox Amber, and the Double Talisman. My lists don't play Ad Nauseam. I don't play Coin the Week. I don't play a lot of the fast mana, no Cabal Ritual, things like that, because I'm not really trying to go fast. I'm not playing Necropotence, and so I was never particularly high on Mox Opal or Mox Amber. With these, even, I think those cards are better when you have, you need to make mana post Naws, or just have rocks to ramp out or flash out after a Necropotence. With no Dockside, I'm a lot more interested in just having them be, less efficient mana engines. Accumulating mana over, this deck accumulates cards. It's got Tymna and Kraum in the command zone. That's kind of the whole thing. But accumulating mana, and especially an excess of mana or an overwhelming amount of mana, is a lot harder than it used to be. And when you draw lots of cards, these cards are good because you can just play them and they make mana for you. So I've been really impressed with the Mox Amber, Mox Opal package. I am up on 2 talismans here, the blue-white, blue-black. Of course, I think these are the right colors if you're only playing 2 in Tymna Kraum, especially in a deck that's not that deep on red. There's no Jessica's Wills, no Bergies, things like that. So not that much interest in red. I was convinced to play a Rite of Flame in this deck because it casts talismans, and sometimes you need to make the double red for Final Fortune, and it's helpful, of course, for Breach Gamble lines. Rite of Flame is the only I'm on Spirit Guide, of course, but Rite of Flame is the only other mana positive ritual that's only 1 mana. Like, I'm not on Cabal Ritual. Of course, Dark Ritual is good enough to play, but Rite of Flame I found pretty good. Diabolic Intent has been a pretty great card for me. It's really handy to get rid of your Esper Sentinels and Kraums before going for consult wins. You don't have to worry about those lose conditions. A Demonic Tutor is good. You should play Demonic Tutors. And this deck, of course, does go up a couple extra creatures. I guess not that many because you lose the clones, but a couple more grindy creatures that you tend to have in play and keep around, like Delny and Facebreaker. Facebreaker's been an all-star for me because it is a 2/3 menace, of course, which makes it pretty unfavorable to block. And making mana, again, is one of the more challenging things to do in the metagame these days without Dockside. So ways to accumulate mana advantage are better than they've ever been, and this is a great Tymna attacker with that in mind as well. Delny, I think, stands out as one of the best cards printed for Tymna Kraum in the last year. I don't think it's close. This card is insane. If you haven't played with Delny, just put it in your deck. Put it in all your Tymna decks. I don't think there's a world where you cut it from a Tymna deck in 2024. This card doubles Tymna triggers, and it makes it very hard to block Tymnas and Tymna adjacent cards. So this card's phenomenal. It has additional synergy with Dockside back when that was legal, but now it has synergy with some of the all-time favorites. It works with Ragavan, it works with Bowmasters, it works with Lotho, and it works with where is it? There's one more in here. Esper Sentinel. Where's Esper Sentinel? Whatever. It works with Lotho, Esper Sentinel, Bowmasters, Ragavan. This card is super, super sweet, and it overperforms every time I see it. So definitely this card is phenomenal. You'll notice I did sleeve up a Cursed Totem. The Adrenaline Vala never left any of these lists, but Cursed Totem did make it in, and that's because of that Thrasios Kinnan sort of dichotomy. Those two decks are very strong. Players are playing a lot of them, especially post-ban. Dorks are on a bit of a resurgence now that Dockside has left. Green is coming back in a meaningful way in the Pacific Northwest. And Cursed Totem was, frankly, an all-star for me. It was just a card that was great to see. Obviously, does nothing against the Rogside decks and the Tymna Kraum decks, which is okay. It's okay to have a card that doesn't do that great against a couple of the other decks in your pod, because that's what the rest of your tech is for, is to deal with the cards or with the decks that you're most concerned about. And Cursed Totem is just such an oppressive effect. Same with Adrenaline Vala, especially so cheap, and it has a lot of just broad-reaching ability in 2024. So I kind of swear by Cursed Totem. I just don't think this card is cuttable from Tymna Kraum anymore. At least in the Pacific Northwest, where people are playing activated abilities and lots of dorks, this card is phenomenal. So, of course, that leads us to the deck I played yesterday in the finals. And so, coming off of the King of the North tournament, my friend and I sat down in a voice call and ended up making 5 swaps. So, Fire Covenant over Deluge. I regretted this decision throughout the event. I was really unimpressed with Fire Covenant, mostly because I kept getting attacked. People, even though I wasn't on Nas or on Necro, I've won enough events, I guess, in the region for people to be like, oh, this guy needs to die. So they got my life total pretty low pretty fast, which made Fire Covenant a lot less flexible and powerful than I wanted. Deluge, sort of caps out at 4, maybe 5 life. Fire Covenant, kind of the floor is 4 or 5 life. So I was really unimpressed with Fire Covenant and am going back to Deluge in the future decks. I finally dropped down from 29 to 28 lands. I think I may have been up 29 here. 29 here. Okay, I think I was at 30 at one point for one of my lists, but I'm back down to 28, dropping Manamo. We talked about a lot of different lands that would fill the 29th slot. We talked about Urza Saga. We talked about Talon Gates. And eventually we decided that we wanted to just play, or at least I wanted to just play a Talisman over the Manamo. I looked at blue-red and was like really unimpressed with the idea of not having white in my Talisman, because I play 3 double-pipped white spells. And Ranger Captain into Esper is a line of play that I like to be able to make. So yeah, between Ranger Captain, Grand Abolisher, and Adrenaline Vala, these 3 double white spells, I was like, well, I want white on my Talisman. Between red, white, and red, black, red, of course, has more double-pipped constraints like the Breach Gamble line I was talking about, and then, of course, Final Fortune. But I decided that I wanted the black so that I could, play Talismans out and then cast Vamp Tutors or Imperial Seals on turn 1, as opposed to being able to cast Ragavans or Red Blasts on turn 1. So that was why I settled on the Talisman of Hierarchy, but I think the red-white one is reasonable as well. The One Ring was a card that both my friend and I, were not super impressed with. I mean, this card is meaningfully powerful, very good to ramp out early, but it's not that good in the mid to late game because you don't have the time necessarily to pay it off. And I felt that I had plenty of card draw with some of the other engines, especially cards like Facebreaker, and Adrenaline Vala being a beater, and Delny. And so the amount of cards that I drew never really felt like my gate. It was more mana that I wanted to find more ways to do. So I played Rev, which is kind of like Facebreaker. My experience with Rev, I tutored for it actually twice during the tournament. It was really unimpressive to me. I don't think that this card's definitely playable. It's definitely in the top 130 cards for Tymna Kraum. But I don't know if it's good enough to justify being played in sort of a stock or a standard Tymna Kraum list. Steel Enchantment was a card that I got really hyped on when I started talking about it. I was like, man, the games that I am most worried about are the ones where my opponents have Ristic Studies and Smothering Tithes. Steel Enchantment solves that problem. I should put it on my deck. It sucked. It basically was dead a ton of the event. It never really did what I needed it to do. I didn't really have any of those games where it was Ristics versus Tithes, and the ones where I didn't see the Steel Enchantment, so I was really unimpressed with it. It sort of rotted in my hand a decent number of times. The Mnemonic Betrayal came about because of something that happened in one of the semifinals for the King of the North tournament. I got stuck where I made a couple mistakes and ended up with my Born being exiled and my Thoracle being exiled, and my opponent was under the One Ring protection, and so I couldn't Brain Freeze them out. And if I had Mnemonic Betrayal, I would have been just fine. And I was like, I think this card is still probably good enough because it's a 1-mana win the game. These lists have Mystical Tutor in them, and I wasn't super impressed with Mystical Tutor in terms of not being able to find Nas, so it didn't really present wins. And I was like, well, if I have a Mnemonic Betrayal, it kind of starts presenting wins. It becomes a lot stronger in those contexts. So I added a Mnemonic Betrayal to my deck, and this card was an all-star for me. It was outstanding. There was a number of times where I was like, well, this card, wins me the game if I cast it, which being able to present wins, being able to capture windows, is something that I was really impressed with Mnemonic Betrayal. So this one's definitely sticking around. The cutting of Cyclonic Rift, the idea was that with, Flood Maw, Chain of Vapor, Path, and Swords, there was plenty of spot removal. So 2-mana spot removal being kind of subpar was not super appealing to me. I did regret this decision. I think having an overloaded Cyclonic Rift in your deck is a good thing to have because it is an out to the mega clogged board states. Being on Fire Covenant, of course, meant that Deluge was no longer an option for me. And I was, on low enough life where this wasn't sufficient. And of course, Fire Covenant and Deluge also don't deal with enchantment stacks. There was one of the semifinal game was sort of defined by a Blind Obedience and a Deafening Silence that were in play for most of the game, which I'll talk a little bit more about when I get to those rounds. But yeah, I wish I had a Cyclonic Rift in my deck, so this card's probably coming back. In fact, yeah, I don't know if I remember to add it to the Tymna Kraum control list, which I'll cover later, but Cyclonic Rift should be in there. And then Metamorph, my friend played the Metamorph over the Rev. He said it was great. I mostly agree. I think it's nice to have a Metamorph. Clones are still strong. There are still plenty of things you want to copy. And instead of having the One Ring, you can just Enlighten Tutor for Phyrexian Metamorph if an opponent has a One Ring and plans to be doing that plan. So generally a good card worth playing. Let's talk about the tournament itself. Of course, 5 rounds of Swiss, and then a cut to top 16. I did make the top 16. So I'm going to talk about each round. I am pretty bad at remembering the rounds themselves, so I will do my best to sort of recap them. As I mentioned, I played against this Rog Tevesh list, which was pretty stacksy. It was sort of a polymorph deck into stacks creatures, lots of land destruction. This game was sort of an interesting one. Sephiroth is the dungeon commander, which I'd never seen before. It was starting to accumulate value and getting ahead. Josh played out a Gigantha at one point, and at this point, I think I had a Ristic. If not, I had maybe some other type. I had some sort of value engine. I was accumulating resources, and I was pulling ahead of the game, and people started focusing me down. The Rog Tevesh player Luke had deployed a Bloodchief Ascension, and we were getting drained by quite a bit. I think Luke was up to like 40-something life, if not 50 life. And we were all getting down, below 20, below 10. And people were pretty scared of me, so I was getting the beat down. When Josh deployed Gigantha, I just didn't think about the fact that meant he untapped and won. So I missed a massive table talk opportunity to re-pivot the prioritization or threat focus for Luke and Anna. From me to Josh's position. I had lots of options and lots of things I could have done to interact with Gigantha and to prevent Josh from winning the game, but I just completely missed that he had a win on board, and it was a pretty poor loss from my end. That was just a my mistake. I was too focused. I was tunnel visioned on defending myself and preventing myself from losing the game. So the final turn of the game, I played Tymna and Kraum to go with my Rev and just had 3 blockers up instead of being able to vamp tutor for an op agent or some other type of line of play with the assurance that Luke and Anna weren't going to kill me before Josh untapped, because if they did, then we lost the game to Josh. So big throw on my end, but Josh played it well, and he tabletoped himself into a good position and kept the threat focused on me, kept me behind for most of the game, and of course was once he untapped, he very quickly established the win with the Gigantha. So great play from Josh, and a round 1 loss for me. It seems that I lose a lot of my first rounds. This is I lost my first round at King of the North, and I seem to play better when I'm playing from behind. But good play from Josh, and I took an L in round 1. Round 2, me, Kyle, Shiwang, I think. I'm trying to remember exactly how he pronounced it. I'll call him Shia for now, and Andrew. This game was really tough, I think, for all of my opponents. I had a turn 1 Rhystic Study followed by a turn 2 Smothering Tithe. The Tithe got Beseju'd before Shia untapped on turn 2, but that was a pretty beating of a hand. I think I had a Gemstone Caverns into land into Lotus Petal to cast the Rhystic, and then top decked a Rite of Flame or a Soul Ring or something to deploy the Smothering Tithe. It was some stupid thing like that. So I was on the advantage for most of the game coming out of there. I found a relatively early Curse Totem, which basically locked out Yisan. Then there ended up being an op agent. The Curse Totem did work. Both Korvold and Tassiger were slightly choked on mana at the start, and the Curse Totem shut off both their dorks. It put Korvold really far behind for a good number of turns. And that op agent, of course, I think I yanked Korvold's land with the op agent, so I was able to make another land drop and just continue to apply a lot of that pressure and keep them down. They got to a point where they were sort of stabilized with a couple Bowmasters in play from Korvold and from Tassiger. And I think what ended up happening was I deployed a Adrenalin Vala. They got rid of the Curse Totem, went away somehow, and my Adrenalin Vala became a copy of Yisan, and I end-stepped, activated the Adrenalin Vala to yoink a Esper Sentinel, untapped, cast a Grand Abolisher, or tutored for a Grand Abolisher, and then I think I just Oracle Consulted, or no, maybe that was the Breach. I think I Breach Wind because Korvold wanted me to play it out, so I went for a super protected Breach, but I had Breach and Oracle and Consult all in hand, and at that point, with the Grand Abolisher in play, there was nothing much they could do. Pretty standard, play a Rhystic Study, grind with Rhystic Study, don't get killed, and then just pivot to the win once the window opens. Round 3 was a draw. I was playing against Ben on Kenrith. Ben was one of the players who made one of the previous top pods. He's a strong player. I think I'd played against Ryan before, but I don't recall what deck he was playing in the past, and then I don't think I'd ever played against Braden before. This was a really odd pod. One of the first things Braden said out of the gate was, "I'm playing for a draw. Can we agree to a draw?" And the 3 of us were like, "No, we would like to play. It's round 3." For most of the game, Braden would bring up over and over again, "Oh, do you guys want to agree to a draw?" Or, "I'll go for a win unless we agree to a draw." And we kind of told him, "Well, just go for a win, and then we're going to stop you, and then we'll continue playing Magic because we, still want to win and still want to try to make the top 16 pod." We went back and forth. Kenrith, I think, Braden went for a win attempt. He was stopped. Ben went for a win attempt. He was stopped. I missed an opportunity to Final Fortune at the end of Braden's turn because I tapped incorrectly. So I had to wait for Ben to untap, present a win, get stopped, and then pass to me. The final turn of the game, in this situation, I had a line where if I had tapped differently, I was down at 1 life, I had an Ancient Tomb. If I had played slightly differently with a Fire Covenant earlier in the game, I wouldn't be that low. And then I would have had a SWAT for the Court of Calling that came at me. I also intuitioned for an Abolisher. So at one point we learned, or the Ryan said, that there was a endurance that was available to interact with Ben's win attempt. I ended up countering Ben's win attempt, just a hard cast counter Thoracle, maybe a Force of Will or something like that. But Ryan telegraphed that he had an endurance in play, so I was like, well, I need to be able to play around this endurance. So when I cast an intuition, I found Grand Abolisher, Pact of Negation, and Silence. They gave me Grand Abolisher. When I cast the Grand Abolisher, he cast Cord. I had a SWAT in my hand, but I didn't have the mana to pay for it, and instead of tutoring for Grand Abolisher, I could have just tutored for 3 pieces of interaction because noticed at one point that he mentioned it was a Chord, not a Hardcast Endurance, so I didn't actually need a creature counter spell. I could have found, like Swan Song and stuff like that. When I was at 1 life, of course, that Chord just found a Bowmasters once he started searching his library, so this was a throw from me. But I had Final Fortune into a Mnemonic Betrayal, grabbing the Tymna Patch and the Consult, or the Tymna Patch and the Thoracle from Ben's graveyard. So this was a game that I definitely had a chance to win had I intuition for the right pieces of protection. But it just slipped my mind that he had the Chord instead of the Endurance, so I didn't interact with the Chord, instead expecting to interact with the Endurance, which I can beat with the Mnemonic Betrayal going on the second turn, or just going for a Breach line if the Endurance is, whichever graveyard it is. But I felt that I had to bait out the Endurance or have interaction for Endurance specifically rather than for Chord, and that cost me the game. By the time my turn ended, we were at time after the 3 win attempts, so that was the game just sort of ended in a draw at that point. Round 4, I'm up against Ryan. He made the finals at that previous King of the North tournament that I mentioned. He spanked us pretty bad at the King of the North event. He had a turn 1 Rhystic Study, which I forced a negation, and then turn 2 top deck to Necropotence, cast the Necropotence, and I did not untap on turn 3. So Ryan, obviously a very skilled Rogside player, and I had some fear going into this round, especially up against Mono Red, Michael on Magda, and Mono Colorless, Connor on Zillidock. Magda, I don't think this game ended on turn 2. Ryan went for a turn 1, the One Ring. I had a force negation for it. I had a pretty cracked opening hand. My next turn was, or my first turn after force negation Ryan's play was land, Mox Diamond, Soul Ring, Wishclaw Talisman. I drew a land for turn, untapped, played that land, and drew a Consult. And then I just Wishclawed for Consult Oracle and turn 2-1. Connor's Zolodok deck was looking very scary. He had a turn 1 Mana Vault into Key into untapped Mana Vault, and then a Chalice on 0. So he was prepared to drop a 7-drop on turn 2 or an 8-drop on turn 2, and that would have put him pretty far ahead. He mentioned having a Chromatic Orrery in hand, so he was going to be able to cast his commander and then do something he mentioned and cast the Chromatic Orrery and double Cascade or whatever it was and start accumulating crazy resources. But no, I ripped like a champion, had the interaction to stop Ryan's early card advantage engine, and then just slammed a turn 2 and got there. Round 5, Set Down versus Alexander. I know he's one of the people who made one of the previous top pods. I've played against Josh before. He's a strong player. I think I played against Tyler before, but I don't recall exactly. This pod I sat down and I looked at this and I thought, okay, here's the blue piles. Here's where my Steel Enchantment's going to be useful. Sure enough, as the game progressed, I think the second turn, I kept a hand that was like Ancient Tomb, Talisman. I deployed a Dranith on turn 2, or I had the option to deploy Dranith or Rev on turn 2, and I went with Dranith, because then turn 3 I can cast the Rev and attack with Dranith and get mana and cards. But Tyler threw that a wrench in the works by casting a Wheel on turn 2. So while I had a Dranith in play, I lost my Rev and a bunch of my stuff. Josh ended up deployed a Bowmasters in response to the Wheel and started applying a bunch of pressure, of course, with that. Alexander ended up with a Smothering Tithe. I think he end step Vamp Tutor for Tithe, cast Tithe on turn 2. I didn't do anything meaningful on turn 2. Josh cast Aristic on turn 2 and went to attack Alex, and then I think Alex swords the Orc because we were going to negotiate to kill him. Josh cast a Wheel on turn 2, or on turn 3 rather, and that ended up being interacted with, so we didn't get another set of 21 Bowmaster triggers, and Alex had a Smothering Tithe at that point, and so I was like, well, we can't be doing this Wheel. But I ended up untapping on, I think, maybe turn 4, and at that point, Alex had deployed some stuff, and Tyler had gone for a win, I think. And so the win had been interacted with, and Josh had tapped out for something. Maybe it was protecting the Wheel, and it seemed like my window had opened. So I cracked a Wishclaw, passing it over to. Oh, I had op agented Tyler's on turn 3. Turn 3 or turn 4. I op agented Tyler on a Demonic Tutor and stole his Mnemonic Betrayal because the Wheel had, of course, filled the bin with lots of juicy cards. So when I untapped, I just sent my Wishclaw over to Tyler to find a Grand Abolisher. It seemed like all of the shields were down. I slammed a Grand Abolisher with Cavern of Souls. Alex consulted for consulted for, oh my god, Mindbreak Trap. Mindbreak Trap did my Abolisher, and I was like, I don't think there's any more interaction for this meme bet. Slammed the meme bet, and there was not, because Josh had tapped out. So Josh with a Ristic and Alex with a Smothering Tithe. Between the two of them, feeding each other, they were not able to get through just the uncountable Grand Abolisher, followed by the Mnemonic Betrayal. So that led to a round 5 win. But this was an interesting one with the wheels. I don't play against a lot of wheels, so that was an interesting one to play around. But with the round 5 win, I was now 3-1-1, which put me at 16 points, which was the number 2 seed, maybe the number 3 seed. I think it was the number 3 seed going into the top 16. So I got to sit first in my semifinals. This was a crazy grindy game. I mentioned Kilgore earlier. That's what he goes by on Top Deck, but his name is Devin. So I was playing with Devin, the driver for our car. I knew that there were going to be at least 2 Sisseys at this event. One of them was the Captain Sissay finalist Jonas, and the other, of course, is my friend Devin playing Sissay Weatherlight Captain, and of course lots of other Sisseys and Kenriths. And so I sat down at this pod, saw Sissay, Thrasios, and I thought, wow, this would be a great Curse Totem hand. And my first 7 was Esper Sentinel, Curse Totem, and Smothering Tithe. And I top decked Drannith Magistrate on turn 2 and top deck Op Agent for turn 3 or something like that. And so right out of the gate, Esper Sentinel turn 1, Drannith turn 2, Op Agent turn 3, Smothering Tithe turn 4, Curse Totem turn 5. And by that point, I had just put so many stacks effects in play and was accumulating so many resources off of Tymna and Kraum that I felt that I had just an absolutely commanding lead. Devin deployed like I mentioned earlier, I think a Blind Obedience, and then there was a Deafening Silence out pretty early. Those two things eventually combined with Karanos, which prevents you from breaching, meant that I didn't really have a breach line available to me, and this game started to grind. I think we played this for like 2.5, maybe even 3 hours. This was the longest semifinals pod. Eventually, I went for a Tainted Pact I eventually cast a Grand Abolisher, which got Mindbreak Trapped. And then later on in the game, I went for a Tainted Pact for Ranger Captain, forgetting that I had a Curse Totem in play, which was an abysmal throw. Like, it was an abysmal line of play. This is, we had been, the round 5 pod, one of the other ones went 80 minutes over time. So our semifinals started at like 8 p.m., maybe 9 p.m. is when we actually sat down to play the semifinals, starting, of course, at 10 a.m. that morning. So 11 hours in and 2 hours into this super grindy match. My life total was starting to get low. They basically just kept attacking. The Thrasios Rog player had a Seaborn, Thrasios, Kinnan, Gaea's Cradle with 7 creatures in play, and literally had like 20-something mana every single turn with the Seaborn Muse, but because of Curse Totem and Adrenaline Vala, they couldn't do anything about it. I basically had this whole game in a stranglehold for most of the game, and I just couldn't find an opportunity to turn that corner, and because of the Deafening Silence, I couldn't really protect any of my wins, even when I had quad protected wins. So I just slowly interacted, grinding 1 for 1, Red Blast Heuristic Studies when they come down, interact with things that are going to help my opponents get back into the game. As my life total got lower and lower, I felt that I had to go for a win, so I Tainted Pacted for the Ranger Captain, which was a mistake, and then I cast a Facebreaker into the pod to be like, oh, well, this is mana neutral because I'm going to get 3 Tymna attacks, and then I can, dig a little bit deeper with these treasures, and again, forgot that there was both a Karn that Thrasios Rock had played and a Curse Totem that I had played. So 2 catastrophic mistakes in 1 turn. From that point, I was really on the back foot. I kind of expended some of my core resources to start going for a win because I felt that I was starting to get behind them. They were just going to kill me from life totals. At that point, Devin started to really apply the pressure on the board, trying to, just kill me dead. Running out of life, I just sort of ended up in a position where Chris and Dylan realized that when my Drana Ilinvala and Curse Totem and Drannith and Op Agent and 2 Esper Sentinels, one of which I had Mockingbirded, when those cards all left the battlefield, Devin was set up to win the game with his Sissay. He had, probably 20 some odd mana worth of creatures and a Sissay and nothing to stop him from winning the game. And at that point, Dylan started giving me spirits with Forbidden Orchard to keep me alive. I had made these 2 sort of egregious mistakes in a row, and I was pretty upset because I don't like making mistakes. And I think that my sort of dejectedness at that point in time, because I felt, man, I really fucked up this game. I was in a super commanding position, and I've made this horrible mistake. I think that gave me some amount of sympathy from my opponents, which was probably unjustified. But either way, they felt bad enough that they decided not to kill me, especially given the context of what Sisay was able to do. The key problem here, though, became that if they never killed me, Sisay could never win. But also, they weren't really able to advance the game themselves. So they needed me dead so that they could play, but also needed me alive so that Sisay didn't win. And I don't think they really ever found a window to get through. The turning point of that game, after I started having enough, spirits to block Devin's board every time he swung, he's just started throwing it at the Thrasios Tevesh. I think that made the Thrasios Tevesh player, made Chris feel a little bit more concerned for his survival, and he snapped off an overloaded Psych Rift. Dylan chose not to interact with it. Devin could not interact with it. I chose not to interact with it because I wasn't going to be dead on board to whatever Chris had in play, and I felt that if Chris, finally went for it, I was going to be able to untap. I still had Oracle Tanapact or Oracle Consult in hand, and so at that point I was like, well, I just need to hope that this is the window that's been opened. Not being able to ever open that window for myself because I didn't have a Cyclonic Rift was, a big sticking point for this game. I mean, I probably drew like 40 cards over the course of this game, and never really found a way to break through the locked sort of board state. So I have some concerns with this deck going into sort of the ultra late game with that context, especially with the stacks pieces that I'm able to play. As strong as they are for me, that whole dying to attacks is a pretty significant detriment to the deck's core game plan of taking the game long. So I'm curious about what I might do to deal with that in the future. But either way, Chris overloaded the Psych Rift. At that point, the board was clear. He went for a win between Dylan. Chris made a core mistake after the Psych Rift. He vamp tutored. I op agented it. Chris Pact of Negation my op agent, and then Dylan Pact of Negation Chris's Pact of Negation, which was the end of the game at that point. I still had 2 counterspells in my hand. 3 actually. I had SWAT, Force, and a Misstep. And I showed the SWAT and the Misstep being like, I can't do anything about the Pact of Negation. Or no, it was anything about the Psych Rift. That's what I was talking about. But I had shown them to Dylan to be like, oh, I'm not your enemy here. We should let the Psych Rift resolve because I can't do anything about it unless you want to. He felt that was his only way back in the game. But he forgot about the SWAT in my hand and ended up pacting the Pact. And it was also incorrect to pact the Pact because that gave me the Vamp Tutor. I found a Mind Break Trap to use that to interact with another one of Chris's attacks. But that put me in a position now where I'm untapping with I haven't had to expend no resources for protection. And then, Dylan had to pay for his Pact of Negation on his turn and didn't have any more interaction after that. And so I was finally able to untap and win the game. This was a really, really tough pod. It was really, really grindy, really, really nuanced. These were all strong players. This was the first game that I played that day that felt that like all of my players here are really working hard to keep me down. There's usually, 1 to 2 to 3 players in a pod where it's like I'm able to just sort of sneak by or be creepy with the Tymna Kraum, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not that much of a threat. I'm just drawing cards, whatever. And then, find the window, seize the window. This pod, they did not let me do that until right at the very, very end when that Psych Rift went off. But I think the nuance of Chris feeling the pressure from Devin, from the Sisay player, caused him to fire it off. And then Dylan feeding me the spirits was tricky because what needed to happen really was Chris and Dylan needed to work together, maybe table talk with Devin, with the Sisay player, to prevent him from winning. But they needed to eliminate me, and they did not, which allowed me to find a window to sneak through right at the end. By the time we sat down for the finals pod, it was 12:30 at night. I think I mentioned this already, but me and Jonas had a 3-hour drive back to Portland. Ryan had a 3-hour drive back to Vancouver, and we did not want to play another 2-hour pod ending at 2:30 and get home at like 6 or 7 in the morning. So we decided to draw. I asked to be named the winner because I wanted the clout, and I wanted Atlas to have one more loss on our head-v-head record, and they didn't care. They just wanted to go home. So we chopped up the prize and said, hey, we'll agree to a draw and name Nicholas the winner. And I know all these people well. I've played, obviously Jonas is a local for me. He's a good friend. I had played against Ryan the week before and is a good mutual friend with a couple other people that I know. And of course, Atlas and I have dueled plenty of times at this point. So they said, well, Nick will take the Cradle, and then we'll deal with it after the event. We talked about it. Atlas had a buyer for the foil Cradle, so we sent it off with him. He's going to sell it, and we split it up. So everybody got about $1,000 total worth of cards and cash after the split. But yeah, that's the tournament. So great event. It was a good time. I enjoyed Tymna Kraum. Performed very well. There were a couple cards that I wish I had had, a couple cards I wish I had not had, which takes me to what I'd play tomorrow. So Tymna Kraum control, and the first thing I wanted to check, did I put the Cyclonic Rift back in? I did. So this is the deck that I would play if I was to show up to an event tomorrow with Tymna Kraum. You're going to notice it's almost the exact same as the tournament that I played in the finals yesterday, with just a few of those swaps, and you'll see some of the you heard some of the context as to why I made those swaps earlier. But really, it's just three changes: Fire Covenant out, Deluge in, Rev out, Phyrexian Metamorph in, Steel Enchantment out, Cyclonic Rift in. So I just wanted to make sure that I had a little bit more ability to break through those mid-game games, take out cards I wasn't particularly impressed with, add cards that I know are staples. A few key exclusions from this list, and I renamed it Control after some of the grindy Cursed Totem shit that I was doing. But I mean, feasibly it is a mid-range deck. Distinctly, the One Ring is still not in the deck. I think that card is plenty playable. It's a very reasonable card. I decided that Phyrexian Metamorph was a better card for the slot than the One Ring. Some other cards in here that I would totally be willing to play and test some more. I wanted to take a look at Berkey. This is a card that allows you to convert, your 14 or 15 cards that you untap with for whatever reason into 30 cards, which wins you the game most of the time. Gilded Drake is still a mid-range house, very, very strong. Fairy Mastermind is one of the best value engines I'm not playing. It was kind of between Fairy Mastermind and the One Ring for me. Namely, Fairy Mastermind does die to Bowmasters, which is part of why it didn't get played, but a flying attacker that draws a bunch of cards is great. Fairy Mastermind also is your win condition if you don't have to beat the One Ring, because you can mill everybody. I guess you can't beat the One Ring with it, because you can't mill the One Ring player out. But somebody told me that this was an outlet, which I kind of made sense. I guess it allows you to outlet breach lines if you don't have Oracle and you can Born Upon the Wind the breach for their turn, you can outlet with Fairy Mastermind. So then Sarah Ascendant was the last one that I was like, man, I wish I could find a slot for this card. Very, very good in those super crazy grindy games, but didn't end up making the cut, and I just don't have the slots for cards like that. They're great, but the other cards that do the thing so well that it's hard for me to look at them and decide not to play them. But yeah, that's the video. I do think Tymna Kraum is the best deck in the format right now. I don't really feel like there's anything else that can do what Tymna Kraum does in terms of being able to create windows and capture windows. There's a lot of decks that are very, very good at creating an early window like Rogsai. There's a lot of decks that are very good at creating late game windows like Tymna Thrasios, and I think Tymna Kraum is one of the only decks that kind of threads that needle. I had a game in this, the Pod 3, where was it? Yeah, this win here where I won on turn 2, and then, the semifinals win, I had 11 lands in play, and I had missed land drops. So it's very much, this is the deck that feels the best able to capture both all of the explosive strength of early games, explosive strength of your Oracle Consults and Underworld Breaches, as well as having the mid-range grind and the late game control aspects necessary to take the game through to victory. So really impressed with this deck. I definitely will be playing more Tymna Kraum in the future. It's definitely my go-to tournament deck, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks.